But on like day 2 of a bender, you're fucking sweating balls. You're by yourself in a dark fucking room. You're sobbing by yourself, trying to get a hold of your fucking plug. But there's this huge part of you that's like sobbing and stuff because you know you should get sober. You're like, you know this isn't right. And you're like, I need to stop. And you have like these weird moments of like clarity that happen for a minute or 2 minutes. And it's like truly Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You start having this moment of clarity of like, you're looking around and you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm missing work. You're shaking. You're looking down at your fucking drug, and you're just like, and then there's other part takes over, and it's just like, fuck it, and you do another line all of a sudden, trying to like stop this real voice in you that's going, dude, I need to get help. Like, this isn't right.
Eric Zink, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, I was saying before we started recording that your YouTube channel just absolutely pulled me in with, how honest and open you've been about addiction and struggles and mental health and stuff like that. Because it is rare for someone to be that open about their journey and that, much willing to share about what they've been through.
No, I think a lot of people are, and I don't know why. I found if you get people on a one-on-one basis, you find out like everybody went through like a lot of deep shit.
Yeah.
But on just being more open about it level, a lot of people are very closed about it. And it was one of those things that just never really made a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of feels like a conversation that you'd have with a buddy at a bar that's, been through some shit, and they're just kind of pulling you aside. Yeah. And you have all these questions, and you're like, oh, that happened and this led to that. And now and how did you get through all that shit? So it does have like a very in the moment, set up the iPhone, fucking just roll it and talking about life.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted. I just wanted, my whole big thing was I just wanted people not to feel alone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that was always the worst for me, is if I felt like nobody understood. And then I started to be like isolating and stuff. And that's a lot of my addiction was around self-medicating, and not going to therapy and not doing trauma therapy and just using to avoid it all. And,
yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I saw a post, I believe it was on your Instagram a few days ago, and you shared a quote, and I thought this could be a good place to start about like the whole thought process and the thought cycles that come with addiction. And your post that you shared said, there's nothing in this world that can trouble you more than your own thoughts. So I wanted to ask you, as an addict, and you describe yourself as a cocaine and alcohol addict, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are my drugs of choice.
Can you describe the struggles that you've had dealing with those thoughts and those negative thought cycles and sort of like what that's been like for you?
Yeah, a lot of those thought cycles were avoiding. I mean, it was a lot of what it was. It would numb stuff. It was like the ultimate like painkiller in a way. Like, you didn't have to address anything, and when you're alone, it's like your thoughts just, man, they can go to bad places.
Yeah,
and they're not focused thoughts, and for whatever reason, a lot of times mine would drift just to really bad places. So I found the more that I drank and the more that I used, the more that it just kind of quieted it, and it didn't go to those places. It distracted me, made me feel alive. It made me feel temporarily happy, maybe. Filled a hole I thought I had in my chest. I didn't really realize that it was like making everything even worse. And it's a scary place just to be by yourself sometimes. When you're around other people or you're doing things, your brain's distracted, but man, when it gets quiet, it gets quiet.
Yeah, when you're sitting there and I don't know what it's like to struggle with addiction to the level that you've been through, but I think everyone's familiar with that feeling where you have no distractions left. Maybe you're done for the day at work, or maybe you're in a quiet moment in the middle of the day and you're just like fucking off somewhere, sitting down, and then reality sets in where that first negative thought hits, and then all of a sudden that leads to another one and another one, and then all of a sudden you went from like maybe being somewhat happy 5 minutes ago to now you're just in this dark, never-ending deep cycle, and just sitting there with it, no matter how you choose to handle it, is something. Yeah, I don't know what that is, like, because like it's such a buzzword thing to say. I've I deal with my negative thoughts. I do meditation, and I do mindful practices like that. But I don't know for sure if that's what helps me get out of it, or it just stops eventually, or like what that thing in my consciousness is that just like decides to go there and then it lifts all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's finding ways to work around it, because like mine can go from anything from like bills or money to now I'm a failure to now I'm failing to now all of a sudden what's the point? It's snowball effects from something so small into something huge, and then I'd become a little bitch and I'd be like, I just can't deal with this right now. And next thing you know, I'm drinking, and now to offset my drinking, cocaine played hand in hand with it. So now I'm doing coke, and this time would be different because I'll just do a little bit this time just to give me something to do. And 12 hours later, it wasn't just a little bit, and it just turned into a mad obsession every single day.
Did you have at the beginning? Did you have a threshold of the intensity of a negative thought that it seemed would require you drinking or doing coke or another drug, or was it just a negative thought and then you just like go right into it, or did it have to be like at a certain level?
In the beginning, I didn't self-medicate, or I didn't realize that I was really self-medicating. It was just fun. I just think like everybody else, it just starts off that, it's kind of fun. You want to fit in with everybody. I think people with ADHD struggle with it a little bit more than what a lot of people are, because when you dive into how ADHD works, I was diagnosed at 13, re-diagnosed with ADHD at 17. And you have a lot of like rejection sensory. You have a lot of, you pull out all your character flaws a lot. You feel like you're failing, all this stuff. You want to try and fit in. You know that there's something wrong with your brain, and you don't know why you're not normal. And so drinking kind of makes you think that maybe this is normal. This is what normal is like. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel a little bit happy. You thrive on the dopamine rush.
Yeah.
And so at first it's just kind of like a party, and then all of a sudden you realize that you just don't kind of want the party to end, and all of a sudden at some point it flips. I don't know when it flips. Like for me, it flipped, I don't know, mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And there would be, I'd set thresholds, but it's a joke as an addict. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to have one big Dixie cup of vodka, or what was it? It was Captain and Coke. So I'd have Diet Coke and so I'm pouring half a Dixie cup, half a fifth of Captain Morgan, and a little bit of Coke inside, because I'm only going to drink one of these a night.
Yeah.
And that would last for like 2 days, and then I'd be back to like, 2/5.
Yeah. I feel like whether it's with drugs or even just something like food, where you can just trick yourself into being like, well, there's lettuce in this bowl of fucking like sour cream and cheese and other shit. So technically it's a salad, it's relatively healthy for me. You got like one splash of Coke in there and you're like, well, I mean, technically it's a mixed drink. It's not just a cup full of Captain.
I'm not drinking it straight, and
Yeah.
don't worry about that. It is. I mean, you look here, you're like, man, I worked hard today. I made good money. I deserve this. This will help me unwind. You build up the stress almost more in your head than what it was in reality. And you're like, I need this just to unwind, to let loose with my friends, because I don't want to waste the whole night just focused on work and trying to, be stressed out, which I think is a load of bullshit. But that's kind of the bargaining that we do in our head, and we try to justify it instead of just saying, yeah, I got a fucking problem.
Yeah. Do you think if you just saw people pour themselves drinks that you could tell who's an alcoholic and who's not? Like if someone in the morning was like, I just need a little hair of the dog, and they make a Scrooge, and they make like mostly orange juice and like a splash of vodka, and then another guy that's like filling up a venti vodka with a splash of orange juice. Could you tell which one is which?
Yeah, because the funniest part is the alcoholic will make a screwdriver, but will have a separate cup or something on the side that you're not really paying attention to. That's just pure alcohol. And that's the messed up part. Like alcoholics, I always tell people, you want to know if you're an alcoholic is if you have to justify drinking. Because you already know that you're drinking too much. There's some part of you subconsciously that knows that this isn't right. There's a problem here. And you have to tell people, you have to make it known, like, oh, today was a hard day, or today was this, and this is why I'm doing it. And dude, I've known people that were like alcoholics that would like empty out like gum containers and shit like that and literally pour straight vodka in that. And they'll be drinking orange juice or whatever, maybe a Bloody Mary, but they'll be taking shots out of this. And nobody else knows that it's shots because you got to be secretive. You can't let anyone know. And as soon as you're hiding it from people, there's a fucking issue.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I went through a phase when I was in college. I'm 30 now, so this is like 8, maybe 9 years ago, where half of my baseball team was prescribed Adderall, and every guy had extra Adderall. So I was always like, "Yeah, I'll fucking take a 20 milligram for tonight. I'll chop it up." Started blowing lines of Adderall. There's a phase where I was just doing it like every weekend, and then it got to one point where I was like doing it in secret, and I realized I was trying to hide it from guys because I thought like for them it would be a little bit too much. Like we just did Adderall and I wanted more Adderall. It's like, all right, I'm gonna, pretend I left something in the locker room and go chop it up in the bathroom. And I was like, this is probably like at the time I wasn't thinking obviously this coherently because I was also drunk too, and Adderall and alcohol were, to me made me feel like a superhuman. That with weed, I was like, this is the best drug combination. But like in that that period, there was the next day where I woke up and I was like, yeah, I was kind of hiding it. I've never hid drugs before. This might turn into a bit of a problem. And that was the first I don't even want to call it addiction because that's belittling addiction, but like a wake up call where I was like, yeah, drugs can start to have more control over you than you have control over them. Like it's no longer a tool. It starts to turn into like a meaning, like something that you need.
No, and it does. And that's the scariest thing about it, of how we kind of justify things of, like I would drink shooters. So I would drink 99 bananas. That's how I'd start my morning off. But I would microdose because I'd only get the little shooter bottle. So I'm not really.
I've never heard anyone microdose alcohol.
Oh yeah, that was my whole thing.
I'm just gonna take a little tab this morning.
Yeah, just a little bit. And I'd get and it was funny because it started off literally like on my way to work. I'd stop and I'd get like 2 shooters. And alcoholics don't drink for taste; we drink for percentage. So I don't care how something tastes. I'm not drinking for enjoyment. I want to know what's going to fuck me up the quickest, or what has the highest alcohol content for the cheapest price. And so I'd get 2 shooters, and then it just slowly increased to the point I was buying. So there's a 7-Eleven by our house, convenience store, and they sold liquor in California. And they would stock 99 banana cases. So there's 12 shooters in a case for me. Because I knew them all. Because I was in there every single morning. I would buy a case, and finally, it never dawned on me that case is the same as a fifth. And I would drink that before work, but my mindset was, oh, they're just these little bottles. Didn't realize I'm slamming a fifth of fucking 99 cheap-ass vodka on the way to work.
Yeah, it's like when you open a Pringles can, you're like, oh, each one is just a tiny little chip. And then all of a sudden you finish the can, you're like, holy fuck. Like, I did not see that coming.
You're looking at the serving size and you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah. This just popped into my head. Like, do you, like you see the whole, there's now microdosing with psilocybin and weed. I've seen a lot of people microdosing THC, and it's becoming a daily normalized thing. And I do believe a lot of people when they say that it helps them, and that, taking a small amount of drug, like I drink coffee every morning. I used to do Kratom for a while as a coffee replacement. Then I went back to coffee. But like, do you get worried because you have experience with the sort of like it's starting in a small dose and then it sort of snowballs about the normalization of microdose culture, especially with harder drugs like shrooms or like harder than coffee? I mean, not like hard in the grand scheme of things, but like taking shrooms or smoking a little bit of weed every morning.
Certain ones, yeah. Because I mean, I think that's how we all start off. Microdosing is a great excuse, and I've microdosed shrooms before.
Yeah, same.
I did it for 30 days, and you know what? Yeah, it helped. It's proven it helps with anxiety. It helps with depression. My problem with a lot of that stuff is it would make me lethargic. So like, I'd be happy and I'd be in a good mood, but I don't really want to do anything. But now that I don't want to do anything, it was a different type of depression. It would give me. I always called it the blah depression. Yeah. Where I'm not depressed. I'm not like dark dark place, depressed, but I'm like, man, I should be productive, kind of beating myself up, just not motivated, not super happy, but not unhappy with life. Just at this point in life that's like actually kind of like this teetering place that I find is very scary because you're going to eventually do something to shock yourself out of it. But when I see people microdose certain things, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit. A big one is actually Kratom.
Yeah.
And like, I know that there's a bunch of pro and con for Kratom. So I've done red Kratom, green Kratom, and white Kratom. And so I did this, and everybody's, I think, sobriety is different. I did this, my drugs of choice, my obsessions were Coke and alcohol.
Yeah.
But when it came to these, I did these back in like 2000. I experimented with these, and I did it actually with my psychiatrist because I was having an issue with SSRIs. So antidepressants don't really work on me. That little disclaimer, they say, hey, this will make you suicidal possibly. Well, that's what they did to me. Like something real weak dose like Lexapro made me fucking want to just die. So I was like, maybe Kratom will help. Man, I took white Kratom, felt all right. 30 days, not a huge dose. I dosed it in the morning and in the afternoon. But man, when I got to red Kratom, I thought I found the miracle cure. And I had energy. I felt good. My body didn't hurt. It just felt great. Just even energized. I'm on Adderall, and Adderall does do a drop in the whenever it starts to wear off. It will drop you because your dopamine isn't being produced anymore. Yeah. And man, I never felt that whatsoever. I'm like, cool. This is what I'll pair up with it instead of Wellbutrin or any of this other stuff. Man, when I went to get off of it, I was like, this is fucked up.
You had bad withdrawals from the red Kratom.
From the red Kratom. Green Kratom, I could feel the withdrawals a little bit. Like I could feel the restless legs and a little bit of the body ache. Yeah. But man, when it came to red Kratom, man, constipated, restless legs, my whole body ached. I'm outside and it's cold outside, but I'm sweating, hot and cold flashes, just couldn't get my body. Dude, it sucked.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I took green Kratom for maybe 2.5, almost 3 years, and I would take it in the morning, somewhere around 1 to 2 grams as a coffee replacement, so a lower dose. If I go on Kratom Reddit and I see people are taking like 30 grams I'm like, Jesus Christ. But it was weird. After about 3 years, I went on a trip to Japan where I wasn't using Kratom for 2 weeks, just kind of like forgot about it. Maybe felt like a little bit of withdrawal for the first day or two. And then I got back and started taking it again, the same brand. And then I just couldn't sleep. And I was, I'd slept fine on the Kratom, just taking it in the morning. And then if I had a podcast in the afternoon, I'd take a little bit more, but that was like once a week. And never had trouble sleeping. All of a sudden, going back on it after 2 weeks, even a lower dose, it was just fucking with my sleep. And I did an elimination of, all the supplements I was taking to try to figure out if I had bought something that had been tainted with caffeine or another amphetamine. And it wasn't that. And I got off the Kratom, and within 2 days, I was sleeping. So for me, I enjoyed Kratom. If it didn't fuck with my sleep, I probably would have still been on it. But like, as you know, probably to an even more intense level, you can't take like a supplement to deal with shitty sleep. Sleep is shitty sleep, especially when you're doing it every single day. So I was just like, all right, if this is fucking with my sleep, it has to go. And I was like, all right, I wasn't taking that much of a dose anyway, where it was starting to make me feel high. So it's not that big of a loss. And then after a few weeks, I was like, all right, that was that was fun for what it was. Fun while it lasted. Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So what would you say sparked your addiction? Like how did the foray into combining alcohol and cocaine begin?
It was always kind of there. I used Coke a little bit in high school. Never didn't do a whole lot for me. And I drank and stuff in high school, all that stuff. My first divorce, when I went through that, so I've been divorced a few times. That's when I did Coke again, and it hit differently. I was in a real low point of life. I was a real nasty divorce. super depressed, all that. Friends had kind of talked me into going out. And man, coke gave me everything I wanted. It took away all my depression, all my anxiety. I was sociable. I was just hoorah, having a good time. And it really kind of just hooked me in. And so I'd always used it on and off, but not super obsessed with it. It all went way overboard in 2015 when my wife committed suicide.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thanks. My wife and I were codependent addicts. We had met. I used to run RV dealership, so I had a lot of disposable income. And we were both alcoholics. We'd laugh about it. We were alcoholics. We would drink every night. There was no non-drinking nights. And she was also taking benzos, and I would do coke. And we wouldn't do that every night, but a decent amount. But we separated because it got so bad that I knew one of us we were going to die in the route that we were going. She ends up committing suicide, and instead of like really handling it and dealing with it, I just started numbing it, and it just kind of made all the pain go away. I would say after her suicide, she committed suicide in August. By October, I was probably drinking 2/5 of vodka a day. And I started using more and more coke to offset the effects because I'm running an RV dealership at the time. And that stimulant doesn't sober you up, but it gives you the impression that you're sober and allows you to kind of push through because it's more powerful than alcohol on your brain. And so I just started self-medicating just nonstop for like the next 2 years. And unfortunately, my tolerance built through all that. So it would go from a gram in a day to 2 grams in a day to 4 grams in a day. Now that's over an 8-ball Coke a day, to some days it'd be 2 8-balls of Coke in a day.
Expensive too.
Oh yeah, no, I figure at the peak, my addiction was running me about 15 grand at easy a month.
Damn.
Yeah.
Whew. Well, if you're slinging RVs, it sounds like there's some good, you said some good side income or some good sustainable income to keep you at that level. I guess that's also why a lot of people quit coke too, or they go to something else, is because they just run out of money. But if you have a good job, it's funny, like, because cocaine has this reputation as a high society drug, and it started with people doing it in clubs, and you go out to a club and it costs $200, $300, $400, even more if you're getting bottle service that night, and cocaine is associated with that. And so you don't really see the people that just run out of money and switch to crack or maybe something even more intense like heroin, because they leave the scene. So I feel like coke has just kept this reputation because of its price, because it kind of prices people out of the image. Like the price is good PR for coke, because it's kind of like the bouncer to get in to the party. Is like, if you don't have the funds, you got to go put your poor ass image on some other drug and then come back to coke when you can afford it.
It really is. And that's the scariest thing about it, is like at that time I was making 40, 50 grand a month.
Damn.
I was making stupid money, and I work with a lot of coke addicts, and the one thing I will say is coke addicts are successful motherfuckers. Like they make money. But you blow so much money on this, and you have this weird warped sense of, cocaine is what's brought me success. All this, like, you really like idolize this drug a lot differently than you do anything else. And there's no stigma around it. No one, if you're at a club and somebody walked up to you with a syringe and was like, "Hey dude, let me tie my shoelace around your arm and shoot you up," you'd be like, "What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?"
I'd be like, "Where's the bouncer? Someone get this guy the fuck away from me."
Yeah, dude, you would freak out, or if somebody came out to you with a fucking broken fucking light bulb and was like, "Here, dude, I'm gonna light this on fire, smoke the fucking fumes inside." You'd be like, "Dude."
Yeah, I'd be firefighters on speed dial.
Yeah.
this place is about to burn to the ground.
Yeah, no shit. And that's the thing is all these other drugs have these stigmas that are really freaky, but cocaine doesn't. Cocaine, you think of like Scarface and you think of all these, Hollywood actors and just all these people. It's a party drug. That's all it is. Like you can't get really addicted to it, and you don't realize that. Yeah, you can, and when you can't afford it, you are on the street smoking crack, and that's why they made crack.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Like the image, if some guy, it's such a normal thing, if he walks up to you at a party and he offers you a bump of coke, you may not even think twice about it. But if another guy, like you said, walks up to you with a fucking light bulb pipe with some meth in it and is like, put your mouth over this broken glass, I'd be like, get the fuck away from it. Like,
Yeah.
who let this guy in? But like the effect on my brain, they're different. Meth and coke are different drugs. They're still, putting you through the roof in terms of its effect. It's just like the image of a meth addict is so far from where I want to be when I'm at a night out with my friends.
Yeah, image of a meth addict is you're missing all your teeth. You have all these sores all over your face, and you're just you look like shit. Where image of a coke addict is you're like in a business suit, all fucking successful baller with a Ferrari.
Yeah, 100%. What is the part of addiction like when the drugs are relatively new, but they haven't destroyed your life yet? Because it seems like at the beginning there's a period where, if you're doing lines before work or something like that, like that's like punk rock. You have a secret and everyone else is living their miserable caffeinated lives. And you're like, I've got this little secret in my pocket that's making this way more fun for me than it is for you. Like, what is that period like?
It's fun, but it's never enough, if that makes sense. Like it's never enough. It's really weird. It opens up like this hole in your like soul, and you're constantly trying to fill it with shit because it's not enough, and you have to push it harder. And it has, like, for me, I had to push it harder. I had to risk more. I had to, like, there's a part of me that literally just wanted to just burn my life to the ground. As weird as it sounds, like I knew what I was doing. And I would just keep throwing shit into the fire, seeing if I could get away with it. Not sure why. I mean, it was just pure insanity. My wife at the time worked with me. She was about 11 years younger than me. She worked in my service department. And at the same time, I'm banging the receptionist. I'm banging the girl upstairs and a couple of the saleswomen. And like, I just thrived on just pure chaos. And I don't know if there's a part of me that wanted to get caught. Started mixing in other drugs too, because if you drink too much and use too much coke, your dick doesn't work. So now you're popping Viagra, which is a whole different mix when you start adding that in with alcohol and blacking out. It was so weird. I hated life unless I was high. And if I was high, it was so numb that I couldn't feel anything.
Yeah.
And if you would have asked me at any given time during those, where, I do a lot like with TikTok and stuff, and people are like, dude, this sounds like so much fun. I wish I could do this. You're living the life or whatever. And it was like, if you would have asked me at any of those given times, I would have been like, I would have rather taken a gun and blown my brains out than be high and be alive.
Wow.
I mean, it was such a weird, dark place that's so hard to explain to anybody who's never been there, because it's so lonely. It's so lonely. It's so scary. You know that something's wrong. I literally don't own a gun, and I'll never own a gun because I do struggle with depression. But especially then, people would be like, I'd have chances to buy guns for investments or whatever like that. And I'd be like, no, I can't own one, because I knew I'd blow my fucking brains out. I would get that depressed because it was the crash, I think, would really show you who an addict was.
Yeah.
And my ex-wife would have videos of me like sobbing naked, crawling on the floor, wailing about how I'm a failure and all this shit. And I'm just like, God, you're just a puddle of a human being. Like, why are you doing any of this? And if you ask me why I was doing any of it, it was literally so I don't hurt. I don't want to be in any pain. But all the pain that I'm running from is literally shit that I keep creating or I've ran from.
Yeah.
And that was the part that was just so insane.
Do you think that's why it can be so hard to identify someone who's an addict, or someone who's maybe having some suicidal ideation because they have these vulnerable moments, like that, they'll break down in front of maybe someone they love, or a close friend they know is not going to film them or rat them out. But during the day, I imagine you get really good at putting on a face, and then when that's
Yeah.
also fueled by drugs, and you get a little extra boost to everyone else, it's just like, oh yeah, Eric's the happiest guy in the office, and they don't see those other moments. Do you think that's why it could be so hard to tell where someone's at mentally?
I think it's so hard to tell where somebody's at mentally, and I think it's so hard. I think you won't ever tell people are depressed because we get to the point that we're faking it, that all of a sudden we like lose our association with reality, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
yeah.
Um, your brain, I think, really truly fucks with you. At least it did with me in my depression. So my depression would isolate me, and it would literally play games with my fucking head. You're wearing that fake smile, you're telling everybody you're okay, and people be like, "Oh, hey, how are you doing today?" And visibly, you could see that I'm having a shitty fucking day, but I'd be like, "Oh, just living the dream. Oh, okay, cool." And then in my brain, I'm like, "Yeah, see, they don't fucking care about you. It's obvious
Mm,
that you're struggling, but they don't fucking ask anymore." And I would literally have all these internal conversations like that, and you felt like you were just being fake because you're like, dude, I'm really truly struggling, but no one seems to want to hear it, and they only want to be around the happy me. So I got to keep faking being happy because I still don't really, in a sense, want to be alone. And it puts you just in this really weird position of struggle, and it's also like with friends and family. I think the same goes with addiction and with mental health. Friends and family aren't going to help you
mm,
because you can hurt them, and they can hurt you. You know what I mean? Like when it
yeah.
comes to depression, I'm going to walk on eggshells, man. When I'm talking, there's stuff that I will avoid. I might share some pain, but I'm not going to share the pain because I don't want to burden you with it. I don't want to add to your problems. It's a little bit of almost codependency. I love you, so I want to try and shield you from this. But man, you put me next to a stranger that I don't fucking know, that has no judgment, has no idea of my past or anything, and you look at that stranger and you're like, dude, I want to fucking die. And
Mm,
tonight when I go home, I'm probably going to fucking kill myself because I'm in that much pain. I guarantee that stranger would look at you whole differently and be like, dude, let's get some help. Like that person would probably go through a fucking hell with you all of a sudden because you do more for a stranger than you would a close family member or
yeah.
friend, because there is none of that walking on eggshells. You'll be real and raw with them because there's no hurt back and forth. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Did you see that Super Bowl commercial with the soccer game where it's like the happy guy sitting next to the depressed guy,
Mm-hmm.
sad guy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of speaks to what you're talking about. And if anyone hasn't seen that commercial, it's basically two guys sitting at a soccer game, and it unfolds over an entire season. And one guy looks, he's pretty sad, even keeled personality. And then their other guy is super happy, always trying to cheer his sad friend up. And then one game, there's a missing chair, an empty chair, rather, and you think it's going to be the sad guy that killed himself, but the sad kind of even keeled guy comes back, and he puts the scarf in the empty chair for his happier friend, or like seemingly happier friend that killed himself. And it's like this twist at the end where you never really fucking know what's going on the inside of someone's brain, especially if you're seeing them for a few hours a week for a soccer game. And speaking to what you said, where maybe that seemingly happier guy wouldn't have told his friend what he was going through, but he probably told some strangers along the way, because it's hard to hold that shit in 100%. You'll get leaks out here and there, but just like that need to tell someone, I totally get that. Not wanting to burden friends and family, even though they want to. If you have a good support system as a family, they'd probably be jumping at the chance to help you. But in your own depressed mind, my older brother dealt with a lot of depression too recently, and is working through that. There's a lot of things that just don't work the way a healthy brain works. Like, you don't make the normal associations a healthy brain does. You don't make the same connections. You start to get in like these dark spirals. And I didn't really understand it at first. Uh, And I would see my brother, and sometimes I get borderline angry at him. Like, why are you not getting out of bed? Like, just fucking get out of bed. You know, go for a walk. What, you know, you're choosing to be like this. And he wasn't my same older brother. And now I feel so bad about making those assumptions about him, because I started to learn more about depression, had no idea the way that it's like if you break your leg, it's obvious because you have a cast around your leg. But if someone's walking around with a broken brain, you can't see it. So you're just like, why is this, you know, why is this person acting like this? It can be confusing. So I totally get it.
Well, it's very confusing. And I mean, that's why a lot of my content, that's why I always am fascinated where people find me at, like on social media, because I do a lot with Instagram. I kind of do. I just kind of reshare shit on Instagram from TikTok and stuff like that. I actually do the most on TikTok. I enjoy TikTok as a platform. I think it has really good freedom of speech along with YouTube. I enjoy because it's just longer format videos. Do a lot on actually Facebook too. I have a huge following there. And that was my whole like thing. Like I found that I focus on numbers now and the joy of numbers, not ego, like I once did, because ego can get into it, which is not healthy.
Yeah.
But I look at more of like, you know, the helping people. Like it just makes me smile. Because, you know, I lost my dad. So in 2015, my wife committed suicide. Fucked me up, man. Hardcore spiral, fucking doing drugs. Just want to die. And I end up losing my job. And at this point, like my rock bottom was my ex-wife. It's not her fault, not my fault. I mean, we shouldn't have gotten married. I kind of like tiptoed into this marriage right after my wife committed suicide in 15. I got remarried in 16. Knew it was a mistake going into it even. But she had melanoma and I had really good insurance. And she was hot. Like she was hot as fuck. So don't get me wrong there.
Oh yeah.
But like we're generational difference. I mean, we had an 11-year age gap. I was like 34 and she was 23. And I mean, at the end of it, like I hated her. I am banging her cousin that's living with us. That's like the same age as her. I wanted to be with anyone but her. Just want to numb life. Like I just hate life. And I break down in bed and I'm like, fuck this. Like I can't do this anymore. What causes all this? And I could relate it back to, it happened every 4 years with alcohol and coke. Every 4 years I would grenade my life. I would lose a important relationship. I would lose a well-paying job. Everything would be fucking grenaded. It'd be horrible for 2 months, 3 months. I'd rebuild a life bigger, better, and stronger than what it ever was before. And then instead of blaming alcohol and coke for it, I'd be like, nope, see, this is what pulled me out of it. I literally had alcohol and cocaine on a pedestal.
Yeah. Where do you think that 4-year cycle comes from? Because it could be 2 years, it could be 10 years. Like, where do you think that 4-year thing comes from?
The buildup of my self-sabotage and destruction is how long it took so I had a lot of trauma from my childhood that I realized that I had that I didn't realize. And I think we all have childhood trauma. And I think the people that are the most traumatized and the most unhealed are the ones that go, yeah, I went through some stuff as a kid, but I didn't have it that bad. Yeah. I was in a middle class, you know, we had food on the table and you're okay. Nobody said that you had a bad childhood. Like, wait, why are you defending this? Like what really went on? Because I was that person, you know, my dad's a fucking super successful doctor, all this shit, you know, money, none of that was issues. But, you know, I know what it's like to be a 7-year-old and forgotten at fucking Kmart. Because your parents literally forgot you and you're standing there wondering where your parents went. Yeah. And then they come back a half hour later, it was your fault. You know what I mean? That stuff actually fucks you up a little bit. And I had a lot of abandonment trauma, so I would self-sabotage. And if things started to get too good, it just became this whole thing of subconsciously I had to prove my trauma right. So I had to do stuff to start just grenading this relationship. And it was never my fault. I was always the victim. Never my fault. Yeah. It wasn't my fault that I cheated on her. It wasn't because she wasn't giving me attention, or it wasn't my fault this. Like I really huge hardcore victim mentality. And so I don't know why it was like a 4-year cycle, but it really was. And I remember just lying in bed going, man, you know, the only thing that's been a constant in this is alcohol and coke. I'm drunk as fuck at the time, crying. And I'm like, fuck this. I'm not going to do it anymore. But I didn't want to tell anyone I was a coke addict because I was like ashamed of that. I'm like, no one's going to believe I'm fucking coke addict. There aren't coke addicts out there. Yeah. I'm like, everybody knows that there's alcoholics out there, and everybody knows I have a drinking problem because I always smell like alcohol. And
Yeah.
so the next day I just flat out said, I have a drinking problem. I don't know what to do. And that's where it started. It wasn't like until like a couple months later that I was like, yeah, I was actually doing a lot of coke, and I
Yeah.
started becoming more and more open about it. It was a very gradual process.
Yeah.
Um,
It's also a slight flex when you say you're a coke addict because you're like, okay, money bags.
yeah.
All
Well,
right.
well, it's not even that, but like I found like when I went to NA, because I've done like NA and AA and stuff, and I believe in the programs for different things. But people would be like, oh, well, I was a fucking heroin addict, and you hear these, even opiate stories. I'd hear people tell, you know, opiates, and they'd be kicking on it, and they hadn't had perks for like 2 days, and they'd get them, and they would just fucking pop them, and they'd vomit them up. But because they didn't have any food, so they're picking these pills out of their vomit, swallowing them back down, and I'm just like, well, I got a paycheck for like $28,000, so I took $5,000 of that over to my dealer and bought a
Yeah.
fucking brick of coke.
Yeah, you guys you can chill over there with your throw up Percocet. I'm gonna do some good shit.
Yeah, and so it's like people just kind of look at you like a little differently, and it's funny because the more and more I start sharing about cocaine, the more I realize how many fucking coke addicts are out there, and we all feel the same way. One, everybody makes really good money. I've worked with coke addicts who are trying to get sober, who literally work for rehabs.
Mm.
I mean, that's how abundant and how many people actually use this drug, which is insane. I've worked with doctors on it and tons of business owners,
So you have
chiropractors.
like people that own rehabs are dealing, or they're just buying
Oh no, they're not dealing; they're using.
using.
A
Okay,
lot of the sales force of rehabs I found.
sales force of rehabs are
Sales is
drug
abundant
users. Yeah,
is abundant with coke addicts because you deal with a lot of rejection, you deal with a lot of stress, you deal with the stress of numbers. This shit takes the stress away, fuels you with a bunch of energy, and you're go. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So it's amazing a lot of the people because I do a lot of one-on-one mentoring to help people slowly set goals and get themselves out of a hole that they're in. But it's amazing, and I talk to these people like what they make income-wise, and all of them easy over 6 figures.
yeah,
And I'm like, oh shit, like this really is a problem. Like a lot of people really actually do cocaine.
yeah. No, I mean,
Huh.
being living in Brooklyn and just being around New York City as a teenager, young adult, I feel like weed and coke are almost opposites, where it's like everyone wants to be the cool guy that will smoke weed and doesn't want to pass the J, even though they know they don't want to get high. So it's like as soon as the joint comes around, everyone's like, oh yeah, I'll hit that, I'll hit that, I'll hit that. And then when coke comes out, everyone acts like it's their first time doing coke. Like, oh yeah, if you like, I'll try it if you have it. I'll take some. But like, I never do this. But like, yeah, well, give me 3 lines. You pulled a silver spoon from your pocket, and you're like, oh yeah, you never do this. So it's like opposites in that way. But yeah, no, it's one of the revelations of adult life is how many people do use drugs, and a lot of it is in a positive way, and a lot of it is a lot of people use cocaine, and it's just a reality of life. And like you said, with the trauma with your wife taking her life, which is I've never experienced something to that intensity in terms of trauma. If you're looking for something to fix it quick, drugs are just right there. It's like especially if you don't feel like you have a support system for trauma, what else are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to just walk through life wanting to kill yourself or feeling depressed, or you take a little bit of this drug and it makes you feel great for 30 minutes or however long the drug lasts, whatever you're taking, and then that's just your answer until you get it figured out. It's like this short-term plug.
It really is, and that's what it was for me. I mean, when she killed herself, that was my fix, And so I finally had hit the rock bottom, and 3 weeks after I got sober, literally on my third week of sobriety, my dad committed suicide. He killed himself, and he was actually a huge support system through my wife's suicide. So my wife committed suicide. She lived in Yuma, Arizona. I lived in Orange County, California. I was driving to Yuma. We were separated at the time. because we both had to get our shit together. And my overall dream is that, you know, we'd both get sober on our own and be able to come find our way back together. Well, that didn't really work out. So when I would be driving, I'd be talking to my dad, and he was, you know, Dad was a very well-known family practitioner. He's a doctor in Michigan, and he would just kind of walk me through it, and just, you know, we had a lot of really good talks. I became really close to my dad. And I talked to my dad. I remember I was getting sober, and he was getting ready for retirement. And I knew that something was kind of off with him, because he was just, my dad didn't know how to identify himself as a dad. He was a doctor, and he's going to lose that in retirement now. And so I remember just talking to him a lot about that, and I'm 3 weeks sober, so I'm like trying to find a new job and all of this shit. And I'm talking to him like every single day. And it was Friday, and I was like laughing with him. I'm like, hey, I'm going to leave you alone for the week, and I'll harass you on Monday. You know, like let you have a weekend alone. Because whenever I was struggling, I'd always lean on my parents. And so, you know, we laughed and stuff on the phone. He sounded great. And then Sunday night, I get a call from my brother that they found my dad's body, and he killed himself.
Jesus.
My wife committed suicide by literally putting a bag over her head, and died by asphyxiation. And it took her 3 attempts, because they showed me the autopsy report and said that they found 2 ripped open bags in the trash.
Jeez.
And my dad committed suicide by going into a Walmart. He was supposed to go play golf with my brother and my niece. And instead of playing golf, he drove past where they were supposed to play golf, went to a Walmart, bought a paring knife, and sliced his wrist, his neck, and put the knife in his chest in his car. And I was 3 weeks sober. And I would remember just getting that phone call, and I was just like, what the fuck? I'm going through a separation with my ex-wife at the time. I'm trying to figure my life out. I'm just like, you got to be fucking kidding me.
Yeah.
And as bad as it sounds, I got sober out of spite from him. Because I was like, you know what? Fuck you. I'm not going to relapse. Because that's what I did when my wife killed herself. And I was like, you know, this is fucking bullshit. And like, I was watching even like my family, like, being really embarrassed that he committed suicide. Like, let's not tell anyone he committed suicide and all that. I'm like, why? Like, why not? Like, that's fucked up. Like, he fucking killed himself. Like, maybe that will help somebody. And that's where my motivation kind of took place for that. But I use that as a huge driving factor of and the first part of it to get sober was just to prove him wrong, because I'd been trying to get sober since I was like 23. I've been on and off at AA and stuff like that. And it stuck. Probably not correctly, because I didn't deal with a lot of my trauma. I had to deal with that later on in life. And thankfully I did. Because I didn't know how to even handle that. You know, people would be like, I'm sorry for your loss and stuff like that. I'd be like, oh, it's all right. You know, he was just struggling. I didn't even know how to like accept people's like condolences. Let alone like deal with the fact that my wife, who I loved my wife at the time. Her name is Brandy. I mean, I loved her. She was an awesome human. She killed herself 7 days, or what was it? 10 days after my birthday, she killed herself. And then my dad killed himself 4 days before my birthday. So I had 2 of the people that I loved a lot kill themselves right around my birthday, before and after. Mad abandonment trauma. Mad. I mean, I didn't realize what it literally did to my brain. I'm like, everyone will leave you, motherfucker. One way or another, they're going to leave you.
Yeah, no shit.
And the worst thing that I didn't do was I didn't go to therapy. And I lied to therapists. You know, I lied to therapists. You know, everything's good, everything's great. And I walked around for a lot of years sober but unhealed.
Yeah. So were you able to stay sober after your dad killed himself? Did you relapse after that, or you stayed sober through that?
I stayed sober through that.
Damn.
And
That's
it was
awesome.
a fight. It was a lot of, I was driven really hardcore off of emotion, though. It wasn't all like, I was doing it all wrong, man. I should have been grieving. I should have learned how to grieve. I should have like fucking, looking back, I should have divorced my wife at that time. Instead, a weak moment, we got back together, which we shouldn't have. We divorced a couple years later. It just delayed the inevitable. I dove into work where I should have dove into therapy. I probably should have receded a little bit with family and just went, hey, let's toss it up here. You lost a wife to suicide. You just lost your dad to suicide. Like, let's get this shit straight up here. But I didn't do that. Instead, I leaned on work because I was very successful with work. The problem also, too, I didn't know what I was getting sober from, essentially, with cocaine. So cocaine withdrawals are unique in the fact that there literally aren't physical withdrawals to cocaine. If you stop using cocaine, you're not going to get restless legs. It doesn't affect any of your nervous systems or any of your neurotransmitters that deal with like pain or any of that like heroin and stuff does. Mm-hmm. But it does change your dopamine. And that was the one thing I didn't realize. And dopamine's your happy chemical. So you build such a tolerance that, I'll give you an idea. I collect Pokemon cards and like the new Disney cards or whatever. I like to collect cards. I just always have since I was a kid. I get joy out of buying a couple packs of these and opening them up. And if I find one that I need, I'm happy. It brings me a little boost of dopamine.
Hell yeah.
That's naturally how dopamine's supposed to work. Well, when you're doing a lot of coke or even a decent amount of coke, you build such a tolerance that your brain will not produce dopamine off of small stimuli anymore.
Mm.
So now you're not happy.
So you're literally losing the ability to become happy off of moments or things that would make a non-withdrawing brain happy.
And that is the scariest part about these withdrawals. And this is what I've ran into everybody of why people relapse. People are like, oh, people relapse because they're bored and stuff. Yeah, we do relapse because we're bored. Coke addicts, from what I've experienced, everybody along with myself, we would relapse because we it's either that or we're going to die. Because we cannot get happy. And it doesn't hit right away. It builds up where you start to really realize that. And so a year and 1 month, it was August of 2018, I attempted suicide. And because I could not I didn't know what was wrong with me. I could not get happy. I went a year of my fucking life. My life is supposed to be better. I'm sober. It's not better. I'm still in a prison in my head. I am not happy. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't get happy to save my fucking life. Mm. Nothing's bringing me joy in life. I'm a miserable fucking turd. Like, I don't know what's wrong. I just want this to stop. And, you know, I'm a burden to my mom and just, you know, all this shit going through my head that I just wanted it done with. Mm. Not realizing
I was going to say, how did you try to do it?
Hang myself. So we lived in a house in Orange County, had hooks, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to hang myself because I know myself well enough. I like myself to a decent amount. So I have to do something that is going to not allow me to back out of it. Mm. Once it's done, I know I'm impulsive enough that once it's done, I'm good. So if I hang myself and I kick the chair, I'm dead. Great. This is how it's going to have to be.
See, I was going to say, I'm so narcissistic. I thought you were going a different direction where I thought you were going to be like, I like myself. Hanging is not going to damage my face or my hair in any way. I want to look good in the coffin. Because I'm like, yeah, exactly. I want my face to stay intact. I want to stay pretty while I kill myself. But sorry to cut you off.
No, that's actually funny. No, mine was literally like I loved myself enough though in a lot of ways that there was a part of me that didn't want to die, but I did, if that makes sense. Mm. And so I knew this way was my fail-safe way. And so I literally like tested out the hooks. I had everything out. My wife had come home for lunch that day because she would come home every day. She left. I put my suicide notes out. I copied kind of what my wife even did because I liked her idea when she committed suicide. So I had the clothes that I wanted to be cremated in, and had my gym shorts and shit on. Laid down a tarp, put the chair up. I knew it would hold my weight, and I knew there was a Grey Goose vodka. We had a party a couple months ago. It was like back in April, so it's August. I knew there's been this fifth of Grey Goose vodka in the freezer. Mm. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna slam that. And that'll be enough momentum of anger and stuff to just step up on this and just go hang myself. And so I even had a tarp out and fucking bleach and a brush to help clean up the mess because I knew I'd probably like rip my neck out. And I went and grabbed that out and my ex-wife replaced it with water. So I went to fucking slam it, and it stayed in there, and I realized that it was fucking water. And in that moment, instead of thinking about killing myself, it switched to, you fucking bitch. Like, you thought I was going to relapse, you fucking bitch. I fucking break that bottle open. It's all fucking frozen. I'm like, mother. And then it hit me. I'm like, what the fuck was I just, and I'm like, this is fuck. This is not right. I'm like, there's a problem. And I called my mom up and I'm like, something's not right. Like, I need help. And so I got back into therapy and got back into a lot. And unfortunately, I lied a lot in therapy. I didn't go in probably as deep as I needed to go in therapy. I didn't make the life changes that I needed to make. Don't get me wrong. I made them when I needed to make them, but at the time, I could have probably saved myself a little heartache or whatever of just getting divorced, moving out of California, making the life changes that I knew inside that I wanted to make, but I was too paralyzed, by society or by my own thoughts or whatever to make. And I muddled through it, but there's still just a lot of self-sabotage and stuff in there.
Yeah.
And it was a hell of a process.
So your girlfriend switching out the vodka for water saved your life, because that was like a switch to, you took it as, you think I'm some little ass bitch that's gonna relapse. Fuck you, watch me live this life now, and that sort of set the wheels in motion to continue.
Yeah, it set the wheels in motion because I was so pissed at my ex-wife because she's the one that did it, and I was like, you knew me better than that. Like, I prided myself on my sobriety because it had a lot to do with like my anger towards my dad for killing himself, and I was so mad at her that it like just kind of flicked the light switch, and I'm looking around like, I almost just fucking killed myself, and now I'm pissed over a bottle, and now like my brain is not right, and I'm like, fuck, and that's when I called my mom, and I was just like, I need help, like something's just not right. I remember just talking to her on the phone, and I called my ex-wife, and I'm like, I was like, something's wrong, and got back into therapy, and that helped to an extent. I mean, I got back on my meds. I was off my meds for a while, and that kind of started jacking me up too. And so it was trying to just get things rebalanced back out.
Yeah. Are you able to now look back on some of the darker situations like attempting suicide and see any humor in the situation now looking back on it? Because as you're telling it, like, obviously it's not funny at the time, but there is humor in almost a dark comedy sort of way where someone's setting up their suicide attempt and then all of a sudden they're chugging vodka. They're chugging water they think is vodka, and they spit it against the wall and they're like, what the fuck? And like they end up not committing suicide. Like, and also the way that you're telling it, you're super charismatic as well. It's making me see the humor in that situation. So I was just wondering if you're able to look back on things like that and see some humor in it.
I laugh a lot about this stuff, and I find a lot of like humor in it. I find a lot of irony in it. And I think that's part of my healing process, and a lot of my coping even is I have to find humor in it. Because when you really break it down to what it is, it's like, it's really fucked up. But I have to, you have to kind of laugh about it. And so, I do, and I still even laugh about it a little bit. And it definitely, I think it is part of the grieving process even. I think people who've lost people, part of it is when you can have a humor about it, in a sense, lets you know kind of how far along you are healed with it, where, you can't dwell on it. And that's the thing. I watch people will be like, oh, would you ever remarry after your wife committed suicide and all this? And I'm like, well, obviously you've never watched any of my stuff, because I did remarry. I got divorced, and then now I remarried again. I got divorced in 2021, and we were separated in 2020, and I moved to Idaho, and I like literally created the most amazing life now ever, and did remarry, and I have 2 wonderful bonus kids. Like, if you knew my life, like my life story is actually went really amazing again. But I'm glad you wonder if I would ever marry again.
Yeah.
And it puzzles me that people literally think that people would get frozen and trapped in that place in time that you lost your wife, I would be almost 10 years. Like, I'd still be single and like in misery by myself. Like,
Yeah.
no, you gotta live.
No, 100%. So I have something I wanted to ask you because I genuinely don't know anything close to the answer, and as I've learned more about addiction and depression, I've wondered what the answer could be, or I'm sure it's a combination of things. But I've mentioned, I've had benders with coke, molly, alcohol, booze, especially in my early 20s. And, I'm going to music festivals, Lollapalooza, whatever it is. It's like 3 days of going hard as fuck. But then when Monday comes around, I've always had a voice in my head that went like, if you pick up that bag, this is the beginning of the end. Like, if this becomes a weekday thing, if this like becomes part of your normal life, this is going to be, it's going to be a shit ending. And I don't know where that voice comes from because my parents never gave me any really like hardcore drug speeches. They just had like the typical, don't do the harder shit. My dad had a story about weed, about him freaking out, but my parents never were like, don't, when you see that bag on Monday, you're going to want to wake up and do it. Don't do it. Like, they're not sitting me down at 11 years old and saying that. I don't know if it's like biology or upbringing or a combination of both, trauma. Like, what do you think uh, is the difference? Because it's not a better or worse thing. I've learned enough about addicts to know that there's a lot of people who have been addicted to things that they think in these beautiful creative ways, and their brain just works differently. And I think that's a lot of what the drugs pick up on, or like the drugs can expose. But like, what do you think is the difference between someone who sees those drugs and is like, yeah, I can't, this is going to turn into a shit show, and someone that like doesn't necessarily have that long-term thinking in the moment to where they're more thinking about the drugs than the consequences?
The it's hard. I mean, I know what you're talking about when you get done with the bender and you're like, if I do this again, it's this is bad. As an addict, like my life revolved around drugs. It was just so ingrained and integrated into my life. But the weird thing of when you said that, my brain totally, like, literally blocked out the rest you were saying. No offense, like, I'm really honest when it comes to stuff like that,
No,
because
yeah,
my
yeah.
brain literally got hyper focused in on everybody I've talked to, and even myself. With us, when you're like a fucking hardcore addict, it's like on day 2 of a bender. There's going to be day 3 and 4 still. But on like day 2 of a bender, you're fucking sweating balls. You're by yourself in a dark fucking room. You're sobbing by yourself, trying to get a hold of your fucking plug. But there's this huge part of you that's like sobbing and stuff because you know you should get sober. Like, this isn't right. And you're like, I need to stop. And you have like these weird moments of like clarity that happen for a minute or 2 minutes. And it's like truly Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You start having this moment of clarity of like, you're looking around and you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm missing work. You're shaking. You're looking down at your fucking drug. And you're just like, and then there's other part takes over and it's just like, fuck it. And you do another line all of a sudden, trying to like stop this real voice in you that's going, dude, I need to get help. Like, this isn't right. And this other side of you will just kind of take over and you just keep doing it as you're sobbing, going, I need to get sober. I need to get fucking clean. It's the weirdest thing. And I don't know why it happens. I don't know what it is that creates it. Cause like, I was the same way. My parents never gave me these big speeches on like coke, or like, I remember my mom was like, yeah, I did shrooms once and stuff. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Like,
Yeah.
why do I
Grow up and do some coke, mom.
yeah, do drugs, all right?
Yeah.
You're doing fake drugs.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is. And like, I could just lead it back to like a lot of people when I do their first mentoring thing with them. He was a chiropractor. And a lot of times people are late to their first mentoring session with me by about 5 minutes. And they'll get on the Zoom with me and they will have their shirt off. They'll be sweating. And I can see the fucking coke running out of their nose because they are literally on a bender.
Yeah.
And they're like, I saw your videos, man. I just need to talk to you right now. And it's like a process. And it's weird because you hit these low points through your using where you're like, there's this clarity, kind of like the night that I like finally was like, I got to change this. That you're just high as fuck, but you know that you need to change it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the reasoning is behind it, of why we have those moments of clarity, or why somebody after a bender can literally, or, you know, go into Lollapalooza or whatever and go, dude, don't touch this anymore right now. Otherwise you're going to be fucked.
Yeah. So it's almost like the way you're describing it, it sounds like in an addict's brain, you're frozen in time on that day too. Like you said, like no matter if it's day 2 or day 200 to you, it's like I'm in the shit. I'm going through withdrawal. It's day 2. I need to get back at it. And there's no sort of like thinking about the future there. It's just like the drugs stop you from thinking about the future as long as you can kind of stay in that frozen bender in time.
Oh yeah. You really, there is no future. It's just me and my drugs. You know, I mean, that's what I think one of the hardest things for an addict to do is take whatever they got and flush it down the toilet. Because there's a part of you that's like, well, let me just get rid of it and I'll just use it all right now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's so much Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like, even with me, I know what it was like, and a lot of people do, of like, you know, you'd be like a week sober and you go out and you're like, you know what, tonight I'm just going to have a couple beers. And then you have a couple beers with your friends all of a sudden. Somebody breaks out, you know, a couple lines. You know what, I'll just do one. You know, I'll do one. I deserve it. That's all I'm going to do, though. You do that one line, and the next thing you know, it's like 3 a.m. at a fucking Motel 6 surrounded by fucking strippers, fucking hitting back up your plug, all your fucking money cashed out of the ATM, fucking just fucked up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, yeah, just like the aspect of keeping it going. And, you know, I feel like anyone who's ever, even if you've just been on a single bender, like, you know, that feeling of, I guess if the way I'm thinking about it now that may have played a part in it not becoming a long-term thing is I would almost feel like I was playing a character when I was on a bender. Like I was like, this isn't me. Like, this isn't Zach. This is someone else. And on Monday, I'm going to turn back into Zach. And this guy, whoever I am right now, is gone for at least a few months. Like, this can't happen next weekend. Like, this has to go away. But then, you know, the end of this year or next year, like whenever we do this again, the next festival, next bachelor party, this is the guy that's going to come out, and I'm not Zach. So I don't know. I'm sure it's a combination of things, whether it's like just the way you frame the drugs to yourself. The biology obviously has a lot to do with it, where certain drugs just sink the hooks into people. Unlike, you know, 2 people can do a line of cocaine and it affects your brain in 2 different ways. And one person, it'll just like reach down into their psyche and they'll be like, oh my God, this is the best fucking thing ever. And another person could have a panic attack and be like, I'm never touching this shit again. So yeah, no, everything you're saying resonates with me as well.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how it affects everybody so differently.
Yeah. I was actually going through cocaine posts on Reddit just to see if there's anything worth bringing up and to see what people were saying about it. And I found something that could be entertaining to talk about. So this is from the No Stupid Questions subreddit. And the question is cocaine a hard drug? And this person writes, my AA sponsor asked if I did any other drugs. I said no hard drugs, just occasional marijuana and cocaine. She seemed a bit taken aback by the coke. I reassured her that it was nothing habitual, but she said, sweetie, coke is a hard drug. So is it or is it not? I'm confused. I'm not addicted to it or anything. I just use it 2 to 3 times a month. To me, hard drugs are heroin, meth, and crack. Is there a strict definition to this stuff? And like the first thing I'm reading this, I'm like, it's hilarious that you're talking to your AA sponsor about drugs that you take. And you're like, oh yeah, I also do cocaine. I almost forgot about the cocaine. And we were talking about it a little bit before in the podcast, but like the cocaine has that party drug reputation, so people can associate it with like the high life going out. You know, like it's not necessarily a meth or a heroin. Other people say no, coke is a hard drug. Like, what is your view on it being a hard drug versus a party drug, or both, or whatever you consider? Like, how do you consider cocaine?
I consider cocaine a hard drug, and the reason I consider it a hard drug is because of what it does to our dopamine and serotonin in our brain. It increases your serotonin and dopamine. So your serotonin is your neurotransmitter for mood, essentially. It does a few other things like memory and stuff. But that's why you're in such a great mood. You're stabilized mood wise, and it produces so much dopamine that your brain literally has to shut down the production of it because it doesn't clear it off of the synapses. So the dopamine's transferred between your neurotransmitters, and it's not clearing off of any of your neurons in your brain. So your brain just keeps producing more and more and doesn't realize that until it's a little too late and you have tons of it in your system. So that's what makes it just that euphoric and just, take on the world. And so to me, because of how it alters your brain, it's a hard drug to me. Because it also is one of those that you talk to most crack addicts, they didn't start off smoking crack. They started off snorting coke. They started off with, even a lot of meth addicts out there. But because of how it off centers that, to me, I consider it one of the hardest drugs out there. And plus, so much of it's cut with other shit too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's now that you're saying that, like, were you ever, when you were doing coke, like in the heights of your addiction, was that before the fentanyl crisis? Were you hearing about fentanyl while that was going on? Like, was that on your mind at any point, or not really?
Not at all. Not at all. Fentanyl wasn't even on my radar. I was more concerned with getting coke. So it was common to find coke that was cut with meth. Because meth's a lot cheaper, and coke, after so long, it gets cut so much that you had to put other stimulants in, and meth's a lot cheaper than fucking coke is. So there'd be times that I would do coke and I would feel it burning my nose like it shouldn't be burning my nose per se. And so now I know that it's cut with most likely meth. But fentanyl was never a fear of mine. And now that shit's so rampant that it's in pretty much everything. Like I'm grateful. I'm grateful I got sober when I did before this hardcore fentanyl crisis hit. I've had a lot of friends now that have been buried due to fentanyl. And people don't realize that it's cut in with cocaine for a variety of different reasons. One, fentanyl's not expensive anymore. People used to go, well, fentanyl's really expensive. No. Because I do a lot of research. This is what I do for fun now, because I literally do social media full time. So I love research. And the drug cartels in Mexico can make it now. It's a synthetic drug. Anyone can make fentanyl. It's not based on like a coca plant that's only grown in these areas. You can go down to the store. Some of the stuff you might have to import, but it's chemistry. That's all it is. And so people mix it in. So it's, that perception that fentanyl is really expensive isn't true. You mix fentanyl in with cocaine, fentanyl's extremely addictive. So now you got people hooked to, if you cut a little bit of fentanyl into coke and you get people, you don't know any better, and you do a line of coke and now you are hooked to this. You don't realize it's the fentanyl side of it that you're addicted to. Now you're all in on this, and now you're selling it for fucking stupid money as coke, though it's mixed with fentanyl.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is that the motivation for the cartels or whoever's cutting it to put fentanyl in the cocaine? Because just surface level, those drugs have two largely differing effects on the nervous system. One's going to make you feel more down. Cocaine obviously is going to make you feel more up. Like, are they trying to get people hooked to like the upper of cocaine, but with sort of like a evener out of like a little bit of fentanyl? Because I've heard all sorts of conspiracy theories where cartels are trying to poison other competing cartel supply with fentanyl, and like that's why people are overdosing. Like, what insights do you have on that?
It's all about money. Even like the drug dealers and stuff, and the people that I know and used to know, I mean, all they care about is money. They don't care about people, any of that. But the problem is that if you start killing your money supply, now you got a little bit of an issue. But the mentality even behind it was, yeah, there was some of this cross contamination. Maybe that happens at like a fucking trap house or whatever. But if you ever go to where they're actually doing coke shit, there's not like different tables of fentanyl over here, and we accidentally mix it with the table of coke. It doesn't work that way. So if you mix fentanyl with cocaine, you get two different things. One, you get somebody who's going to be hooked to coke very quickly, very easily. They don't even realize. And if you've never done coke before and you have it laced with fentanyl in it, you're not going to realize what you just did and why you're hooked. The other thing is it's essentially speedballing. So the most common combination of speedballing is, there's two of them. One is actually alcohol and cocaine, and the other one is heroin and cocaine. And the premise behind speedballing is the people think they do a line of coke when they're drunk and it sobers them up. It's a huge misconception. No. Well, it doesn't make your liver process the alcohol any quicker. So all that effects of alcohol is actually still there. Just the effects of cocaine is stronger on your brain than the alcohol is. Same like caffeine. And you drink a coffee, it wakes you up. It makes you more alert. But you didn't just get 2 extra hours of sleep out of a cup of coffee. You have to actually sleep for it.
Yeah. Your liver isn't metabolizing the alcohol more quickly because you had 2 cups of coffee.
Yeah, and it didn't metabolize the alcohol because you did a line of coke, and now your liver speeded up its process. Yeah. So it's the same that goes with heroin. So you're going to get the effects that heroin will normally give you, which with a lot of people, when you first use like heroin or you use an opiate, is energy, alertness, focus are some of the side effects for a lot of people when it comes to using something like that. You see, a lot of us will see the after effects when somebody's massively hooked and they're in the middle of like the nod, where they're literally a zombie standing up in and out of consciousness because they're so high. And so it gives you that speedball effect. So your coke is essentially, you're not telling people that's mixed with fentanyl. People just think your coke is better.
Gotcha.
They don't realize that, the biggest misconception is how the movies and everything portray, because real coke, uncut coke, doesn't look like white powder shit in movies.
Yeah.
When I was buying my coke, if I had white powder shit, I knew it was cut, and I knew it was cut really bad to be that way, because it should be a kind of an off yellowish tint. It should be kind of crusty and scaly. And if it wasn't, and I could open up a bag and it would just kind of plop out, and there was no crusty scaliness at all in there. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Because that's not coke.
So you think there are a lot of people that are doing cocaine laced with fentanyl that aren't necessarily overdosing on fentanyl? Like, it's just in the supply, but it's not enough. Like, obviously fentanyl is killing a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people who are just doing it that aren't dying from the fentanyl.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it's like everybody, again, we all have different tolerances and stuff to drugs. I know people, you meet people who are like hardcore fentanyl addicts that are taking an amount of fentanyl that should fucking kill them, but it's not. But essentially, if you can mix in a small amount of fentanyl, because you don't need much, if you can mix in a small amount of fentanyl and you get it evenly distributed in that, dude, you're going to have buyers for life until they die. Because your shit's the best shit now.
Yeah.
And you can also charge a little bit more.
Crazy. Yeah, no, it's scary out there, because like, you may not be thinking about that if you're a teenager or a college kid, and you hear the stories about one person does coke and then they start passing it around, and all of a sudden 6 people die in a house on spring break, and it's fucking it's scary as shit out there.
No, it is.
That you can't really experiment with drugs, because it's natural to want to experiment, but that there's a lethal cost to doing a drug that is pretty common, and it's pretty rare to like overdose on straight cocaine, from what I understand. But like, the fact that you now have to worry about dying because of the tainted supplies, I don't envy people that are in college, or people that are in their adult life still doing cocaine, that have to worry about that shit. I feel like the anxiety would kill the high. Like, I would be so fucking anxious every time. Like, is this going to be the last thing I ever do is blow this fucking line.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and it is scary. I mean, it's the most rampant drug there is now out there, and that's the scary thing
Fentanyl
about
or
fentanyl.
yeah.
And it's in, I mean, it's in everything. And it's like, they call it like the chocolate chip effect, where if you break open a chocolate chip cookie, the chocolate chips aren't evenly distributed throughout the cookie. Same when it goes with fentanyl and how they're mixed into different pills or into Coke or whatever. You don't know if the line you're getting has a little bit or if it has a deadly amount in it, and that's why,
Mm,
someone can do one line out of the same bag and they're alive, and somebody does a line after them and they're dead.
mm.
Because it's not evenly distributed. Because I mean, they're street corner pharmacists.
Yeah.
Gonna sit there and just stir it up. Okay,
Yeah.
we're all good.
Yeah, exactly. There's no guy banging on the door from the FDA being like, let me test that product. It's just, you're just all freeballing.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some insights or some advice that you'd have for someone who's currently struggling with addiction, or maybe close to someone who is looking to take that next step to get sober, or maybe just like they're at the point where they may even be considering doing something worse, like suicide or something like that? Like, what advice would you have for someone who's like in the shit that realizes they need it to get better?
Is to, if you really want it to change, you have to just tell everybody in your life. And a lot of people aren't at that point, but you really do. You have to get to the point that you can just tell everybody in your life, because that's where the accountability starts. Like when you're in this shit, it's realizing that there's no right or wrong way to get sober. We're all going to get sober different ways. And if you listen to people and you don't find your own path, you're going to fuck yourself up.
Mm,
Because the way that I got sober is in the same way that everyone else is going to get sober, and vice versa. And a lot of it comes from, you have to have just that family support. You have to have that friend support, people asking you how you're doing. You have to find that honesty. You have to want it. Like, you can't be a little bitch, and you have to acknowledge that you're a little bitch.
yeah.
Because I was the biggest bitch of the world, dude. I could look in the mirror, poor fucking Eeyore, and poor me. The world's against me. I'm going to go use. I could find any reason to fucking use. But when I started having accountability, and I really was accountable to myself, and I was accountable to family, that I didn't want to let them down, so I can't let myself down. I started finding ways, and I had to be open-minded and try everything. Whether it's NA and AA together with some therapy, along with meds, whatever it might be. And don't let anyone fuck you up on your path, because even like with me now, if I go into NA meeting, people will criticize me. I take Adderall, take 10
Mm,
milligrams in the morning and 10 milligrams in the afternoon. I'm not sober. When I didn't take Adderall, I was doing 1 to 2 8 balls of Coke, and I was drinking 2 to 3 fifths
yeah.
and self-medicating. So I'd rather have an abundance and have to set my alarm to remind me, because I literally will forget. And I don't take Adderall even on the weekend. So I have to be reminded to take my meds, versus I'm there killing myself. My dad
Yeah.
committed suicide. I was on Xanax for a while to help with the panic attack, so I didn't try and self-medicate. You're going to find your own way through your sobriety. But
Yeah.
I think it really starts with letting everyone in your life know that you're an addict, because it forces you to be accountable. Because I think that's the hardest part with addiction, is being accountable, and knowing that, failure doesn't have to be part of the process, but it also doesn't have to fuck up the process.
Yeah.
Because there really is no failure. People will relapse. They'll be like, "Oh, I was 2 years sober, man, and I relapsed. I fucking failed." And you didn't fail, dude. You found out how to be sober for 2 years. So let's find out how to be sober for 3 years now.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, you didn't go backwards. You didn't lose those 2 years
Yeah.
anywhere. And I think for family members, it's realizing that you can't get an addict free or clean. That it more or less, if you have a family member that's an addict, that it's more, you have to be selfish. You have to focus on yourself. You have to protect yourself and the rest of the family. You have to set up healthy boundaries, know the difference between enabling and supporting. You have to be able to be very firm. And a huge thing is, I think I'll even go into like something like Al-Anon to understand addiction, because so many family members are like, "Oh, why won't they get sober for me? And I love them. And if they really loved their kids and they loved me, they'd get sober." No, that's not how it fucking works. We love drugs more than you. I'm sorry. That's how it is.
Mm,
Drugs won't hurt us. You will. We can
mm,
let you down. Drugs won't let us down. We can control drugs. I know I can do this amount of drugs, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, and this is the feeling it's going to give me. It's always going to be consistent. It's never going to attack me. It's never going to be sarcastic to me. It's never going to tear me down as a human being. It has no emotion. It has no feeling where you do. I can hurt you and you can hurt me. And the last thing I want to do is hurt you because I actually do love you. But I love drugs more because I can't hurt drugs and drugs can't hurt me. People don't grasp that concept. And so, they take it really personal, and it's not personal because you're up against something you can't compete with.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So you'd say for you, it was the making yourself accountable, telling everyone in your life, and then that with a combination of being around people who have had similar experiences like AA or Al-Anon, or, at the least just talking to someone who's been through it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I got sober by literally waking up and going, okay, I want to get sober. I was too embarrassed to tell anybody I was a coke addict, so I told everybody I was an alcoholic. So I started literally making calls and apologizing to people. Didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm an alcoholic. I really need help. He would be like, oh, you got to go to AA. You got to go to AA. So, okay, I found an AA meeting close to me. All right. I downloaded a sobriety thing, and I was like, all right, let me go fucking at this. Like, I wanted it this time. I wanted it different than I wanted it before. I remember going into AA meeting. Didn't say shit. I sat in the back, gave them $1 or whatever in the hat when they passed around, just listened to everybody. And I was like, I can kind of relate to some of these people. Just kept going back, not saying shit, collecting my little token, going, okay. And then I'd find a little bit of pride in I've been sober for 2 days, 3 days. And then I started, realizing how important it was for me to have people to talk to, because that's the worst. Like when you're first getting sober, you need to talk. It's a huge part, I think, of the healing process. And so, I'd be just on the phone nonstop with family or with friends, just talking about my day or frustrations or whatever. If I wasn't at work, I was on the phone.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't on the phone, I was at an AA meeting, just kind of bombarding myself with trying to find the best way to get sober. Because there's things even at AA I didn't agree with. But just because I didn't agree with it didn't mean that it didn't work for some people. And I just wanted to be around sober motherfuckers.
Yeah. That makes sense. To if you're starting something, to have the support system of people who've already been through it makes a hell of a difference.
Because at first you start with a support system that has no clue how to even support you, but they're just like, hey, good job. And they'll talk to you and stuff like that. And they probably will piss you off a bunch on the phone, but at least it gives you someone to talk to. But it slowly gets replaced by people who understand what you're going through. And there's a lot of times, man, that I needed to go meet up with people for a cup of coffee just to fucking unload about my day. And I'd be like, dude, I just need a bitch. I need to just vent, because if I don't, I'm going to get frustrated, angry, and I'll just use, because then it's poor me and this is too stressful and all that.
Yeah. 100%. So as we start to end off, I like to end off things with a game, and I thought a good game for today would be Who Said It? Drugs Edition.
Okay.
So I'll give you a quote and you try to tell me who said it, and then I have a hint if you want it. So I can give you the hint at the end of the quote. So the first one is, quote, "A lady came up to me one day and said, 'Sir, you are drunk.' To which I replied, 'I'm drunk today, madam, and tomorrow I shall be sober, but you will still be ugly.'"
Captain Jack Sparrow.
You could consider it a close personality to that. I think there's a lot of overlap. Do you want the hint?
Yeah.
Cigars. Think cigars and fat.
Marlon Brando?
World War II.
Jesus. Now you lost me with the World War II.
Winston Churchill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And just to be fair, I didn't know any of these either. These are just, I was looking up quotes about drugs online. I was like, all right, these seem pretty fun.
No, that was good. I literally, when you said that, I was like, dude, that's like something from fucking Pirates of the Caribbean.
It seems like maybe Jack Sparrow is low-key based off of Winston Churchill's life. I mean, Winston Churchill and Jack Sparrow were both just day drinking hardcore motherfuckers that were battling people. So,
Mm-hmm.
there is some overlap there. You had the right instincts for sure.
Yeah.
The next one is, quote, if I have a near beer, I'm near beer. And if I'm near beer, I'm close to tequila. And if I'm close to tequila, I'm adjacent to cocaine. End quote. The hint is he's a former late night talk show host.
Jay Leno? No,
No.
David Letterman.
I think he's Scottish, maybe? Or Irish? Scottish.
Conan
Scottish
O'Brien?
former talk show host. Not
O'Brien?
Conan. Craig Ferguson.
Okay.
I was listening to he did a sober monologue on his show that he used to have, the late night show with Craig Ferguson, and I watched that recently actually, where he was talking about the reason why he decided to not make fun of Britney Spears that week. And this was, I think, back in like 2007 when she had first shaved her head and she's like in and out of rehab. And he just went into this whole monologue about the way that he got sober and how he saw commonalities between himself and Britney Spears, and that's why he didn't want to make jokes about her that week. It's really interesting if you haven't checked it out.
No, I have to check that out.
You just type in Craig Ferguson sober on YouTube and it'll pop up for sure.
All right.
And then the last one is you realize that people take drugs because it's the only real personal adventure left to them in their time-constrained, law and order, property-lined world. It's only in drugs or death we'll see anything new, and death is just too controlling. End quote. The hint is Fight Club.
Brad Pitt?
Author of Fight Club.
Oh. I don't know who the author of Fight Club is.
Chuck Palahniuk.
Okay.
He went on. I forget if this is from when he was on Joe Rogan, but he says some interesting things about drugs in his podcast and then also in his books as well. But yeah, that was Chuck Palahniuk.
Love it.
So yeah, Eric, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Definitely,
and I hope that was a fun way to end off. I try to experiment a little bit with the games tailored to each guest experience, and you shared so many insights and helpful things and just interesting stories. Where can people follow you? Where's the best place for them to keep up with your content? Instagram, YouTube, things like that.
Best place is on probably ericbzink.com. That has all my links to YouTube. Because YouTube, I go by Eric B. Zink. It's Eric Zink on Facebook. But then on Instagram, I do the Mr. Impulsive. And on TikTok, I do the Mr. Impulsive.
Hell yeah.
And that was just because I didn't want to try and just like essentially brand myself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Which is counterintuitive to what everyone tells you to do. It's, you got to brand yourself.
Branding is fucking overrated. For sure. If you have good content out there, people will find it. You can do the content first, worry about it later. Worry about the brand later.
I've literally have had more brand deals and more like universities paying and flying me out to speak and all of this, how I do things now. And it's more just being authentic and real. They'll find you.
Fuck yeah. And if for those of you listening to this and watching this, all that's going to be linked in the podcast description, and I'm going to say it in the intro as well for the pod. So definitely go check out Eric B. Zink. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was a blast.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.